Welcome back. Today, we're going to dig into two different sources that describe these moments of incredible pressure on a really powerful political figure, Donald Trump. And this pressure was coming from two completely different directions. One, the legal system, and the other, the court of public opinion.
So yeah, that question, it's pretty much the whole point of what we're looking at today. What happens when a tried-and-true strategy for holding onto power just stops working? When it runs up against forces that just won't back down?
Okay, so first up, let's look at this report about a huge legal showdown. We're talking about the Supreme Court laying down the law, given a choice that was, well, not really a choice at all.
So you got to understand, this thing didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Our source makes it clear this was the end of a long, long road, a 4-year legal brawl over financial records. It all kicked off back in 2019 with a subpoena from the Manhattan DA, and from there it was just years of appeals and challenges. The strategy, as one source put it, was basically delay, delay, delay until they just give up and go away.
But after all that time, the Supreme Court finally had enough. They dropped the hammer with this incredibly tight, unbending deadline. 72 hours, that's it. Comply or else. And believe me, this wasn't just another motion to be filed. This was the end of the line, period.
And what's really wild is the language they used. The source pins this on Chief Justice John Roberts himself, and legal experts were apparently floored, saying it's super rare to see something this direct from the Supreme Court. They called it a hammer, a signal that the court was, and I love this quote, done playing games.
And get this, they weren't just talking about fines. The source really zeroes in on the fact that they specifically mentioned incarceration. That was a very deliberate move. Why? Because a fine can be paid, right? It's just a cost of doing business. But jail time? Well, you can't just write a check for that.
Okay, so while all this legal drama is coming to a head, something totally different is blowing up on another front. Our second source calls it a full-blown crisis of confidence happening right out in the open.
So here's what happened, according to this source. In Minneapolis, federal agents shoot and kill a U.S. citizen, a guy named Alex Pretty. A video of it hits the internet and just explodes. It goes viral, and the source says it kicked off a whirlwind of collapse for the administration. The backlash was huge, and it was instant.
And the whole crisis really boiled down to two completely different stories. You had the official line from the White House, which was that Pretty was shot because he was threatening agents with a gun. Self-defense, right? But then there was the video. And what people saw on social media looked nothing like that. It showed Pretty, who was reportedly a nurse, on the ground trying to help someone when he was shot. That massive difference between the official story and what people were seeing with their own eyes, that's what really lit the fuse.
And the fallout was just everywhere. We're not just talking about the usual political critics. This source points to CEOs, big names in sports, even groups that were normally strong supporters, like major Second Amendment advocates, were reportedly turning against the administration. They felt a line had been crossed.
Okay, so let's pull back for a second. When you put these two stories side by side, you start to see a pattern, right? A playbook that had worked for a very, very long time was suddenly and spectacularly failing. And not just on one front, but on two at the exact same time.
And we've seen this playbook before, haven't we? It's all about delay, deflect, and control the story. You file endless motions in court. You claim it's all a politically motivated witch hunt. You attack the credibility of anyone who questions you. And you use your media megaphone to drown out everyone else. For years in business and politics, this was the go-to method for dodging accountability.
But in these two cases, that playbook just slammed into a brick wall. It ran up against two things that wouldn't budge. On one side, you had the absolute final word of the Supreme Court. And on the other, you had the raw, undeniable power of a viral video that everyone could see for themselves.
So let's just break it down. You have the legal front, where the challenge was a subpoena and the response was an ultimatum from the highest court. And then you have the public front, where the challenge was that video and the response was this massive wave of backlash. In the end, two very different paths led to the same place, a final, unavoidable choice.
So, what does all this really mean? Well, according to these sources, this is bigger than just a story about one person. It's really about putting the whole system to the test, a stress test, if you will, for America's most important institutions.
And look at what was on the line. We're talking about fundamental principles here. Can the courts actually enforce their own orders? Are there real limits to a president's power? And can public and corporate pressure actually create accountability when maybe the political system can't or won't?
And this quote from the legal analysis really hits the nail on the head. The Supreme Court's move wasn't just about getting a hold of some tax documents. It was about something much, much bigger. Sending a message that the principle of equal justice under the law still means something, that nobody is above it. The whole system kind of hinges on that idea, right?
So, both these sources kind of leave us wrestling with that classic paradox, don't they? What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? When a political style that's all about constant defiance slams into the bedrock of the legal system and a tidal wave of public opinion, what breaks first? And that's a question that's not just about one person or one moment in time. It's really about how strong those guardrails, the ones meant to hold power in check, truly are.